Hi, my name is Pins Brown. I'm the head of ethical and sustainable sourcing at The Body Shop, and I've been asked by ETI to produce a short vlog about how we at The Body Shop have been responding to COVID-19. So I'm going to talk you through the main things that we have been doing. First of all, we've been looking at the situation of our own staff, as you would imagine. What does that mean for our retail store staff when in the roughly 74 countries that we operate in, almost all of our shops were shut? And also, what does that mean for distribution centres and our e-commerce staff? So as you can imagine, a lot of our business has gone online, and that has meant increased demand at our distribution centres. So making sure that we're respecting all the government legislation in different countries on social distancing, that people's health and safety is protected, and that they feel comfortable while they're walking up to marathon level around a distribution centre, and that morale is good. So that's the first thing we've been doing in terms of, and that includes our agency workers as well, checking in with the agency staff that we know, what we work with on a close basis to ensure that everything is being respected appropriately. Secondly, in terms of our actual supply chain and suppliers, our International Director of Sourcing and our sourcing department have been talking to suppliers on a range of different issues from tier 1 down to our raw materials. Given that our cash flow is much constrained, as you would expect in a retail business, that has meant conversations about payment terms. Those have been ad hoc with different suppliers, looking at what's the scale of that business. Is it a small or medium-sized business, or in which case they need protection, or is it a large business which might even be bigger than our own? And can then we have a conversation about extending payment terms, for example, and how do we negotiate to face the crisis together? So that's the kind of thing we've been doing at that level, and the ethical trade team has produced a guide for our sourcing colleagues to make sure that we share what does best practice look like covering all those topics, what are other retailers up to, how do we make sure that we consider the best behaviour in a time like this. So that's a resource that we produced for our colleagues. In terms of the suppliers themselves and understanding what's the impact on them in terms of production capacity and their workforce, that means picking up on issues like migrant workers in China and understanding how that's affecting production there, through to, for example, our mango seed oil producer, who's part of our community fair trade program in India, who's been affected by the complete lockdown of Indian ports, and therefore we haven't been able to get our mango seed oil on the water. And that's meant understanding in the short term, what does that mean for production for us? But in the medium and long term, what's the impact on demand? What will the impact be on livelihoods if we have to reduce orders, for example? So that kind of assessment. And the way we're monitoring that is speaking to suppliers. So our staff, our buying colleagues, including community fair trade colleagues, speaking to staff at producers each week, producing an update of what is happening, and then sending that on a weekly basis to our Chief Operating Officer so that he is aware of what is happening on a supply chain basis. Our raw materials buyer has been talking to, for example, producers of glycerin to understand what's happening in biofuels and palm oil, and we've been speaking to the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil to understand what's happening at palm oil plantation level, where sometimes people are being encouraged to stay on plantations when in fact they want to go home. So what are the human rights issues there? So that's quite a wide range of picking things up, and includes indirect impacts like the fact that tools that we needed for the retooling of a plant in Europe were being produced in India, and that meant we couldn't retool the plant. So all sorts of direct and indirect impact. We've been making very good use of the ETI portal, which contains lots of information. All of our buyers have been, given access to it to make sure that they can see, for example, if that's about our fair trade bananas come from Ecuador. We've been in touch with the supplier, but we're also making use of information that ETI has provided. It's been very helpful. And then at a company level, the last thing we're doing is really about more direct, what happens to hands. We're a business that sells health products, as you know. So what does that mean for hand sanitizer? So turning some of our production around to hand sanitizer, making sure that if we produce in a new place, we're respecting our usual due diligence processes, even if we go quickly through our decision making. Is there collective bargaining in that factory? What's the due diligence on wages in that factory? And trying to do that as we would normally do it, but super fast. And then we've also given away over 585,000 products, things like hemp hand cream, which is always very popular because it's really good for hands when you've been overwashing them. So making sure that we've done our bit from a charitable perspective as well, and giving things away that can be useful in hospitals, and that's been around the world. We've been doing that And then last but not least, on domestic violence, an issue that obviously particularly affects women, but men as well, in all sorts of relationships, we have put out an activist campaign using social media to call on governments to make sure that services are declared essential services for those experiencing domestic violence are declared as essential, to ensure that they give funding to those services, and to raise awareness by using social media to make sure that people can understand where they can actually get help. So that's been the last element of our response. I hope that's helpful for all of you.